Reminiscences of the Nehru Age. Mr. Mathai, one of the most powerful Indian officials during the Nehru era, resigned in 1959 following communist allegations of misuse of power. The saddest experience of my life was visit with Nehru to the undivided Punjab. We had to wade through the debris of destroyed houses and dead bodies of innocent people in Multan, Lahore and Amritsar. We witnessed the largest migration in history involving 18 million people both ways. Some years later, a friend asked me who were more cruel, Muslims or Sikhs. I replied, half a dozen of the one were equal to 6 of the other. Perhaps the 6 were one up, and the Hindus did not lag very much behind. At the same time, I happened to see a little boy, almost a child, sitting on the roadside and weeping. He did not know English, and I did not know Hindi, so I took him to Nehru's residence. With the help of Vimala, I found out that the boy was from West Punjab. He had no father. While migrating to Delhi, he had become separated from his mother. I got some clothes made for him and kept him with me in my room for a month. Nehru recognized as one of the world's 5 best English prose writers of his day. The result was that he had to spend an enormous amount of time in dictating letters and drafting or dictating statements and speeches. Some of Nehru's finest speeches were either extempore or written in his own hand when alone, without any disturbance. Gandhiji baffled me on several matters, preaching Ram Rajya of Hindu mythology. Millions of Muslims and other minorities had no use of it. They become alienated by Gandhi's continuous preaching. Preaching of a cow worship, preaching of celibacy for married couples, advocating support for Khilafat movement in India. This was one of the most opportunistic adventure of Gandhiji's. Gandhiji's unscientific and staggering remark early in 1934 to the effect that the Bihar earthquake had been a punishment for the sin of untouchability, fierce condemnation of smoking by the workers, fanatic advocacy of Hindi, one of the least developed languages of India. Gandhiji's letter to Viceroy, written early in June 1940 as Hitler had just overrun Holland and Belgium, was about to fall. The letter read, "This manslaughter must be stopped. You are losing if you persist. It will result in greater bloodshed. Hitler is not a bad man. If you will call it off today, he will follow suit. If you want to send me to Germany or anywhere else, I am at your disposal. You can also inform the cabinet about this." Gandhian economics, it is a sure way of achieving eternal backwardness and poverty in India. During one of his fasts, Gandhiji said, "If I have acetone in my urine, it is because my faith in Rama is incomplete." Gandhiji's rejection of modern birth control methods to curb population. I never considered Gandhiji had anything to teach me about non-violence, ends and means, detachment, compassion, and loving one enemies, because these were preached and practiced far more eloquently about 2000 years ago by Jesus. The last phase of Gandhiji's life constituted his finest hours, more especially the last month of his existence. He was exercised over 2 matters. Number 1, for weeks, representatives of Muslims had been asking him for advice as to whether they should risk death or give up their struggle and migrate to Pakistan. Gandhiji's advice was, stay and risk death rather than run away. Delhi and surrounding areas were overflowing with Hindu and Sikh refugees crying for vengeance on all Muslims staying in India. They had seized mosques and Muslims' homes all over the city. Gandhiji wanted them to return those homes to their Muslim owners and go back to their camps. The Indian cabinet decided to withhold payment of the partition debt of rupees 550 million to Pakistan. The cabinet did not want to distribute the already disturbed public opinion by giving Pakistan the money, which was likely to be used to pay for arms which would be used against India in condition existing at that time. Lord Mountbatten feared that the decision to withhold payment might drive a desperate and bankrupt Jinnah to war. The cabinet refused to listen to Mountbatten. Gandhiji considered the cabinet decision is immoral. These 2 issues, Gandhi's last fast took place. Sardar Patel tried to argue with Gandhiji about the payment of rupees 550 million to Pakistan. Gandhiji's only reply was, "You are not the man I once knew." Gandhiji was deeply distressed at two speeches Patel delivered during the previous 2 months at public meeting in Lucknow and Jaipur, severely criticizing him. Within 3 days of Gandhiji's fast, the government of India announced that it had ordered immediate payment of the amount to Pakistan. Many people believe that it was Nehru who first referred to Gandhiji as father of the nation. It is incorrect. It was Sarojini Naidu who did. Nehru opened his heart almost completely to Gandhiji and discussed with him practically everything. Tall and handsome Lord Mountbatten arrived in Delhi as Viceroy Governor General on 22nd March 1947 with a mission to demolish the Empire of India. Ever since they left this country on 21st June 1948, the Mountbattens remained genuine. Churchill could not achieve his ambition of becoming a great orator, but he became a master of the written word and a coiner of phrases. Churchill's first speech in the House of Commons after becoming Prime Minister in 1940 contained the phrase, "Blood, toil, sweat and tears." This was lifted from Byron's poem, The Age of Bronze. Both Churchill and Nehru were products of Harrow Public School. Churchill sent a brief handwritten letter to Nehru saying, "Remember what I told you? You are the light of Asia." What a transformation in Churchill. Contrary to the general impression, neither Churchill nor Nehru were widely read men. They wrote and spoke more than they read in their lives. Churchill was a great admirer of Napoleon. He kept in his bedroom at Chartwell two small sculptured heads, one of Napoleon and other of Nelson. Regarding Napoleon, Churchill said, "Ah, what was the most beautiful countenance from which genius ever looked upon mankind. He was a very wonderful man. I put him after Julius Caesar. Yes, he is at the top." Nehru lacked the toughness of Churchill and Churchill-type courage in adversity. Bernard Shaw told Nehru that he sincerely felt that Nehru and Stalin were the only hope of the world. If ever there lived a man in India who was absolutely and totally secular, it was Rafi Ahmed Kidwai. Rafi was secretary to the legendary Motilal Nehru for some years. Rafi was a simple man, informal in his ways. He had a large number of men who were devoted and loyal to him. In Delhi, they were called Rafians. Rafi kept an open house where his followers and the other Congress workers could go and partake of his generous hospitality. Rafi discovered that Patel was a wiser and more far-seeing man than he had died a poor man. In many ways, Rafi was a delightful person, like Abu Ben Adam. He was one who loved his fellow man. Son of a Parsi liquor and a provision merchant of Allahabad, Feroz Gandhi, in his early days attached himself to Kamala Nehru as a Congress volunteer. Indira Gandhi was still a student in England. Feroz Gandhi managed to get some financial assistance from one of his aunts and went to London. In 1941, Indira spoke to her father about her wish to marry Feroz Gandhi. Neither they nor Nehru could reconcile themselves to the idea of Indira marrying the son of a local liquor and provision merchant. Nehru allowed the marriage to be performed according to the Vedic rites in 1942. Soon after the marriage, Nehru had Feroz Gandhi appointed as the managing director of the Associated General Limited, which owned the National Herald. Feroz Gandhi had another romance after that. This time it was the daughter of a Muslim minister of the UP government. He decided to marry. Feroz Gandhi spoke to Indira about his intention. She told him that she had no objection. He said he wanted the custody of the first child. She firmly refused to consider this. Nehru considered the Hindu as the best produced paper in India. Nehru was not unaware of the exaggerated claim of the press to represent public opinion. When Henry Truman stood for election in 1948 for the American presidency, practically the entire press was against him. After the Chinese overran Tibet, Nehru and Krishna started talking in public that India and China had lived in peace for 3,000 years, implying thereby that eternal peace would reign. My study of history has led me to the conclusion that in the past, whenever China was strong, it was expansionist. Nehru was not a good judge of situations. After the partition of India was decided upon, he visited Lahore in 1947. I was with him. We stayed in the house of Diwan Ramlal. At a press conference in Lahore, Nehru had forth and asserted that when partition was brought about, things would settle down and both parties would want to maintain peace in their respective areas. Nehru did not impress me as a realist. He struck me as being all too ready to believe what fitted into his picture of the world. Nehru was very frugal about spending money on himself. When Nehru died on 27th May 1964, all he left behind was his ancestral home in Allahabad and just enough money in his personal bank account to pay his estate. Abul Kalam Azad, he wrote, he was a man of the world who loved the good things of life. The Maulana was a vindictive man. It must be said to the credit of the Maulana that among colleagues, he was a rare one who was not afraid of Nehru. He spoke out his mind without fear or any inhibition. The Maulana's greatest opponent in the Congress was Vallabhbhai Patel. Nehru was too much of a refined person to be arrogant. Sometimes he could be abrupt. He was also impatient. He had the minor drawback of a person who started public life at the top. Nehru once described himself as a pagan. Napoleon had many mistresses, but women did not influence him in matters of state. Napoleon once said, woman is the occupation of the idle mind and the relaxation of the warrior. These can be applied equally to Nehru. All the women in Nehru's life after 1947, Lady Mountbatten was preeminent and occupied the pride of place. One thing that I could not fail to notice was that whenever Nehru stood by the side of Lady Mountbatten, he had a sense of triumph. Nehru had no use for any form of organized religion which only repelled him. However, he was not irreligious. He used to carry in his satchel a copy of the Light of Asia, Bhagavad Gita, the Four Gospels, Ashoka's Edicts and the UN Charter, all in tiny editions. Vallabhbhai Patel died in Bombay on 15 December 1950. Did Patel seriously entertain the idea of ousting Nehru at any time in the post-partition period? My answer is no. Patel never forgot that Nehru was Gandhiji's declared heir. In fact, he told several people in private, I cannot forget that Jawaharlal is Bapu's chosen man. So Patel fully realized that Nehru, not he, had the mass following. The first impression Indira made on me 31 years ago was that of conceit. Hated small cars. I had a constant complaint against her father that he always kept quiet at meal times when they were alone and never gave satisfactory answers to her questions. Like most women, Indira has a highly developed sense of the result of her having had no security right from the childhood. I don't know what the future has in store for her, but insecurity will follow her like a shadow all her life, and all her actions will largely be governed by it. It can be said without fear that the Congress party voted for Indira to succeed Lal Bahadur mainly for one reason, that she happened to be Nehru's daughter. Nehru waged a heroic battle against religious fanaticism and mob hysteria. Abraham Lincoln was at one time prepared to compromise on the question of slavery, but Nehru stood as firm as a rock for something basic he believed. He risked his political future and his life by going against the current. With the support of Gandhiji from outside, Nehru ultimately triumphed. A lesser person would have crumbled. It was Nehru's vision, courage, faith, and his vast personal prestige which sustained him in those dark days. Seeing him use his fist against some hysterical refugee looting a Muslim shop in the circus area reminded me of the religious indignation of Christ in the temple.